Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here with a very budget Joker cosplay for y'all today. I am a massive Persona 5 fan. I've been playing the series for over 15 years now, ever since the release of the original Personas, and particularly Persona 3, and this collab was one that I'm very excited for. So, let's jump into the first character here, Joker, who is the protagonist of Persona 5, and get my general thoughts on him. So, for those of you new to this, the review breakdown today is going to be a character overview, a base stat analysis, the report card for the character, my general thoughts in a nutshell, the class and job overview where I go through the abilities themselves, and then some notable vision cards, notable espers, and then the trust stone recommendations with an interesting tweak on something that I haven't done for any of my characters yet, but I think Joker will really benefit from, which is an interesting build that prioritizes AP management. Now for the character overview, brand new Dark unit. They created the wild card job for him while also giving him the Nightblade and Gunner sub job. The weapon choice is a dagger with the equips of hat, cloths, and accessories with a move of 3 and a jump of 2. So a little bit of extra mobility there. In terms of weaknesses, minus 10% to light, pretty standard. And then the overall weapon type resistances are really good. Only negative here is 5% to pierce. The rest of them, the strongest is the 15% to both slash and strike, and then the 5% to missile and magic. So overall, pretty good starting point for the unit. And then status ailment wise, I typically wouldn't recommend 97 faithing him. He is a unit I would have at 50 faith. That being said, 50% to frostbite is interesting enough. Confusion as well, not ones you typically see as often recently, and 10% to petrify, which is really more for PvE content, but overall not something you have to think too hard about. Now for the base stats, this is something that I've segregated from the report card because they're now intricately different, and there's a lot more that goes into the game that affects the base stats now with the second anniversary, where you have the secondary vision cards, you have the trust stone stat increases, the passives that you can put on trust stones. So overall, more of an emphasis on the base stat of the character. And from that perspective, we're going to start looking at the HP pool. So out of all the UR units, an average of about 3,000, and Joker is just right about where that average is for base HP, which means when you give him accessories and equipment that boost a percentage of his HP, he is going to be moderately affected, nothing too crazy. 43rd overall, so relatively average. And you can kind of get a general idea of who's around him by what the HP essentially is. Now for attack stat, I have the average here, just a slight tweak, where if I include all the URs, I'm going to have magic-oriented characters here, which naturally have lower attack values and kind of skew it downward. So I essentially have the average of the attack stats of the top half of attackers. So the average of the top half of attackers is 372. Joker's just north of that at 382. So overall, not necessarily weak. He's totally going to still do some damage, but not the highest attack stat to start off with, which is totally fine. He doesn't really require it. He almost would be busted if he did. From a agility perspective, this is where he really shines. So he has base 64 agility. What's insane about that is it's not including the board agility and not including his passive either. So just his base stats alone, he is one of the fastest characters in the game, and it's a big part of what makes him so dangerous. I'm going to talk about this a lot. In terms of dexterity, which obviously affects your accuracy and critical hit rate, he's relatively average actually. 35th overall, the average is 199, he's at 207, so a little bit above that. He could certainly use some love in the dexterity department just to make sure that you crit hit a little bit more often, particularly against the high luck units that you're going to see in the evasion comps, but his kit isn't really geared around the critical damage, so not the biggest loss in the world. And then the luck stat. How the fuck is he so accurate? One thing that's just slightly misleading about this is that if you were to look at, average dexterity and a little bit below average luck, you would assume he's a very inaccurate character, and that's actually not the case. We're going to get to that in the report card in a second here, but little sneak preview, his board stats are actually high enough that his total, innate stats before any equipment or anything actually makes him relatively accurate, so we'll talk more about that in just a second. But now we talk about the DPS report card. Effective HP, this is such a tough one to nail down for this character. I'm giving him a B+, though. Although the HP pool is totally average, he does have 20 innate AoE resistance. He will get his effective HP way higher with one of his buffs. It grants him Protect and is a 35% barrier of all damage types for 3 attacks. The trade-off is that he doesn't have any innate defense or spirit or passives that can give him defense or spirit. So he is, on the lower end there in terms of survivability, but he's got enough things that do at least bump him up just a little bit compared to what you might normally think looking at the statistics. And it's really no differentiation between whether it's physical or magical. I'm going just a little bit lower here because, again, no innate defense or spirit. He does have the good resistances to start, but overall health pool is relatively low. We look at the primary stat here now, I'm giving him a B, and this is extremely or understated. And the reason why I say it's understated is because he's going to do more damage than what his attack stat really tells you, because he does have a variety of attack types in his main job. He's got slash and missile and a typeless attack, and the dark vision cards that exist on top of the amount of imperils they have, he's going to hit a little bit harder than what this grade actually indicates. But for now, I'm going to go conservatively with a B. Now for agility, A+. Again, as we mentioned, one of the fastest characters in the game. You've got a 12% agility passive as well. This is a massive, massive part of his kit overall. From an accuracy perspective, I'm actually giving him an A as well. And again, despite what the base stats were for dexterity and luck, his board stats are high enough that it kind of compensates for them being average. And then when you put the Nightblade passive on him, which boosts it by another 25% accuracy, he's going to be relatively accurate. One of the better ones in the game, so you don't have to worry too much about him missing attacks. You certainly still don't want to ignore it, but he starts off in a really good place. Now, evasion-wise, very tricky to really quantify this because he's a B overall in terms of evasion. To me, like just barely high enough that he will evade some attacks to extremely inaccurate characters or people that aren't gearing for accuracy, but he's going to be hit by most people considering that he's way below what Elaine and them are. If we actually want to look at the spreadsheet real quickly here, so circling back first on the accuracy side of things, so his luck and dexterity end up getting relatively high once you add in the board stats, and then that 25% passive. He ends up being, amongst the top here, top 10 accurate characters in the game. And when we get to the evasion side of things, again, very lower luck overall. And his agility, I'm actually going to edit this real time. I'm actually going to demote him from an A+ to an A in terms of agility because I completely missed this. So although he does have, among the highest of base HP, kind of the opposite of the dexterity and luck, he doesn't have any board agility. So he starts at 64 and he stays at 64. So if you actually were to, look at total base, total agility on a character's kit, base and the board, 64 ends up being, fair, but there's characters that have way more agility points because of their board than him. He can certainly make that difference up, though. When we look at the evasion with 35% luck, which is really the best way you want to look at this here, Joker essentially comes in around this 85% mark, which is definitely above the average of the 69% by about 15% evasion. But I wouldn't necessarily characterize him as an evade unit. Again, he'll certainly dodge some attacks if people aren't ready for it, but otherwise probably not something you want to lean too heavily in because he's not going to get the same upside comparatively. And again, just for the sake of the presentation, I've actively demoted this from an A+ to an A. He's still really great. And he's got an ability that I'm kind of bumping that up and rounding it up. We'll talk about the ability soon. From a movement perspective, I'm giving him a B+. He's got a move of 3, the jump of 2, and just a little bit higher for that same ability that the agility is a little bit higher for, where, spoiler alert, it's an attack where he will move toward an enemy and will increase his CT by 250. So both mobility and speed from that perspective. From the passives, I'm giving him a B+. He's got some really good ones. I wish he did have one or two that had either slash resistance penetration or defense and spirit. He doesn't. We'll get to that soon. The counter kit, I'm giving him a B. Really should be a C. It's pretty average for the most part. And then the overall kit, though, I'm giving him an A-. He really does have an overall great kit for a final grade of also an A-. Despite a lot of the average stats that you see here, he ends up not really needing them because he does relatively well on his own. Now, for my general thoughts, I consider him kind of like a death by 1,000 cuts kind of character, and for a variety of reasons. So number one, slash, missile, and typeless attacks on the main job. So even if his attack stat doesn't get skyrocketingly high, that's fine. He's got a variety of different ways that he can attack you. Now, conversely to that, he has no innate slash or missile resistance penetration, so that will, lower his overall damage output. He does have a 30 defense break, though, which will also potentially increase it. So there's a lot of different ways that he can attack you. It's not going to be devastatingly large, but it's still impactful. And even more so than that, the speed can't be understated, that when you do end up boosting his luck with the Black Rosalina vision card, which is what I imagine they're probably going for by giving him such a high base agility and not any board, is that knowing that Black Rosalina vision card is the agility buff to the party, he's going to benefit a ton from it, obviously. And to me, that kind of makes up for the DPS loss, where when he's got an extra 250 CT potentially on that shift attack, and then his agility here, he doesn't have to do as much damage because he's just going to get way more turns in against slower teams. So it kind of makes up for the DPS output overall. He does have an interesting, what I consider like an effective HP interaction with a decreased hate of 6 abilities. So, we talk about, oh, he's not very evasive. Oh, the health pool's kind of average. Oh, no defense or spirit. But realistically, if you can go like -5 hate here to start the battle, or -6 hate or whatever it is, and you're like the last up on the, attack priority list, it really doesn't matter what your HP is so long as you're not grouped into an AoE. So from that perspective, I think there's an interesting part of survivability there. He does have good synergy with the existing dark elements, where obviously they're very slash oriented. They've had had a little bit of a magic resurgence and will with Garville EX coming out soon, but overall, Slash and Missile is kind of the wheelhouse in terms of the dark meta, if you will, between Venera and Dwayne and Prompto, and he will take advantage of Imperos as well. That with Dwayne doing Slash resistance down, he's got Dark Imperil. Black Rose Lane has got a Dark Imperil. There's a bunch of different ways that he'll benefit from what they do. He is oddly bulky, as we kind of keep alluding to here, where he does have a 35% damage reduction shield. He does have an ability where he'll cast Protect on himself, and then the innate 20 AoE resistance as well. So it's hard to really quantify his survivability. It just works. I don't know how else to say it other than that. He does have some status ailment versatility. Now, not currently recommended. I don't think he's worth going 97 Faith because the Dark Element's not known for a dedicated healer, so he's not going to really need the healing. And then, obviously, when you talk about some of the current and impending meta, 97 Faith is just going to take more damage from them. But if you are exploring that option, the Wild Card subjob does have Sleep and Confusion, the Nightblade subjob does have Stun, and the Gunner subjob does have Blind and Immobilize. So he does have a fair amount that you could tap into, and if you're really playing into it with like Prompto and Golbez, who are also very status ailment heavy, I could see a time and place where that works, but probably not what I'm recommending overall. And he does have good utility, which is kind of why that kid is so highly rated, where he has a massive attack and magic AoE break, the 30 defense break, he's got the 100% reduced counter chance on the ability as well. He's got a barrier break, and then on the subjobs, he has aimed fire, which is great for someone like Venera, where it's going to increase her missile attack and his range, and then decreased healing power on the Nightblade subjob, where with Velis kind of coming into the forefront of things, this is actually going to be a relatively important ability again, potentially, to decrease healing power because of what he does. Now we go through the kit itself, the passive abilities. Take Your Heart is by far the best ability here, where I would never turn this off. AoE resistance of 15, the agility of 12%, defense penetration of 40, which is a big part of his potential DPS increase. You're going to need this on. I think Nightblade Mastery is another one you're probably going to always have to have on, where attack of 30%, accuracy of 25, and this is why I think he's like a B or C evade character, because if you do have that equipped, it will also decrease his evasion rate by 10%. So I think those two are probably the most consistent, but I do see a time or a place where if you really are trying to lean a little bit more into the range of a certain kind of map, which is where Dark typically struggles on wider maps, if you want to increase that range of 1 or 2, I see no reason why you wouldn't be able to slot that in there as well. You're just going to have to obviously compensate that with increasing his accuracy, because I wouldn't for a second take Your Heart to sub for a ranged ability. It would be the Nightblade Mastery passive that I'd probably take off. And Missile Mastery, this is going to be a little more niche for certain kinds of content to min-max his missile attack. For counter abilities, I almost think this is like a C. I really do think it actually should have changed that grade, where the Rebel Soul is probably the one you're going to put on the most, where it's going to reduce damage taken by 30%. I do like Counter Shot as well, though, where it's got some range to it, but those are really average abilities, Counter Soak and Counter Shot. I really don't have much to say about this. Now, from the main job perspective, Wildcard, we're going to go through the buffs first, then we're going to go through the actual abilities. So the first buff here is Full Power, which is a 40% attack buff for himself and decreases chance of being targeted by 6. Now, unfortunately, I don't have it maxed yet, so I have not tested the priority of these buffs quite yet like I do with some of the other videos, but I'll hopefully have some follow-up on that. The second one here is We Have to Survive, which is positively amazing, that it's a 35% barrier for 3 times, not 3 turns, 3 times, and it grants Protect 25% for himself. So again, really important way to potentially survive against some of the physical damage dealers. When we talk about the damaging abilities, these are really good ones. So the first one is Ambush. This is the one where he moves adjacent to the target panel, 14 AP, and restores CT of 250 for himself. So overall, fantastic ability. I don't know if he's going to spam it, but as the battle goes on, this is going to be a really clutch one late in the battle, where once everyone's AP levels start to get much lower, this is going to be one that's going to help him get his turn a lot faster, and I think it's going to end up winning the battle for you as it goes on. The second one here, Swift Strike, is a massive AoE. That's a decreased attack and magic. I actually don't love this one. It is the most expensive out of the AP. It does have a decent modifier, but I'll be honest, decreasing attack and magic, although it's just 39%, and everyone's like, ooh, that's a big number, it effectively really only comes out to about like an 18% damage reduction overall, which is fine, but the utility is overall not terribly impactful. That being said, it's one of his only AoE attacks, so it really should be enabled at the end of the day. He needs that versatility to not just rely on single unit attacks. A one-shot kill is absolutely fantastic, where decreases defense by 30 and reduces the counter chance by 100. It is a single target attack, but obviously great for potential tank busting as need be. And then Aegion is a great one where it's a barrier break, and more importantly, it's a typeless damage attack. So this is going to do more damage, I would imagine, on average, than his slash and missile type attack. It really just depends what you have for external modifiers on the slash and missile type attacks, but this is just a great one because you really can't gear for it other than dark resistance or single unit resistance. When we get to the sub job here, these abilities are fair. They're a little shorter range. They're still single target. They have, two status ailments that you're probably going to use overall that often. I think niche scenarios, I won't talk too much about them. The Nightblade sub job, time and place for this one, I really think the biggest, benefit to this sub job, as mentioned earlier, is the maiming slash, where you can decrease healing power. But other than that, everything else here is kind of niche and doesn't really do much more than his main kit already does. To me, the gunner sub job here is really where he's going to shine, where I do think aimed fire is a potentially very valuable buff, particularly where you want him to maybe stay back an extra turn. So, that jump of 2, you don't want him running too far ahead too early with the extra mobility. This is a good way to potentially keep him in line, but he also does have double shot here, which is a double hit, which will obviously help increase team damage overall. And then finally, the limit break. This is probably one of the best things about his kit. So this increases defense penetration of 30 for 3 turns. It's a cross-shaped AoE, missile type attack, but it's 100% guaranteed hit chance. So love to see limit breaks like this where you can, try to take out someone early and snipe them, or at least, force an enemy healer into healing very early. And at the end of the day, it's really just great to guarantee some damage. So really fantastic limit break. We talk about his TMR. Extremely good TMR. Yeah, 10 spirit, 12 accuracy, awesome stats for an accessory. It does only have 1 cast, but that's okay. That's kind of the offset for this, for the strength of it, where it increases both slash and missile attack of 15 and AoE resistance of 15. So if you think about him with someone next to like Venera, who does both slash and missile attack, this is a big buff for both of them, not only for their survivability, where this is going to bump him up to 35 AoE resistance, but they're both going to get benefits to the slash and missile attack as well, while also having some decent stats considering he doesn't have any spirit innately. And then finally, the mastery ability. This is where part of his AoE resistance comes from. He gets 5, and the decreased AP consumption of 15. Really important. That's going to come back later in the presentation at the very end. Now, we talk about notable vision cards. The first one that I just want to get out of the way is the one that's coming next week. It's the Persona 5 vision card. It's dark-oriented. This is a great vision card, quite honestly. It's I don't think it's necessarily tailor-made for him, and it's not objectively better than some of the other dark magic cards, but it's a really good one that I think they'll need, where 4 agility is going to obviously make him a lot faster. 20 dexterity is going to help his crit rate and some of his accuracy. I like the buff here in particular, where it's an increase of 15 accuracy and 10% attack for all dark units. But again, context of Joker, this is really great. And then the party effects, kind of the same idea here. We're going to get the human killer of 25 with physical attacks, which obviously helps his damage output. The increased accuracy one is kind of interesting because it's not going to stack with the Black Rose Elena if they're both the main vision card. The 25 accuracy of the Black Rose Elena vision card is going to supersede the 13 that you get from this one. But if you put this as a sub one, or put the Black Rose Elena as a sub one, then they can stack. So combining them together, I actually like that at the end of the day. And then increased HP 25% is good for the party overall. Obviously, his base HP is kind of average, as we mentioned, but dark units are quickly getting left behind because of how fragile they are in the context of the game at the moment. We look at other vision cards, so everyone already knows this. Dark vision cards in particular are some of the best in the game. And I don't have a couple in particular that are the best. I do think Maidens of the Rose is one of the better ones, because I think this slash resistance penetration of 18 is extremely important for Joker, as well as the 35% dexterity and the 35% luck, where obviously that's going to help his overall accuracy and crit hit rate in general, in addition to the 30% attack and the 20% luck. Overall, this card's like perfect for really anybody, but that's, numero uno. The second one that I see a lot of use out of potentially is the Diabolos card, where, light resistance for that potential mirror matchup. The dark attack on both the unit and party is going to help him hit a little bit harder. 1A as my favorite is probably Omega. The difference is, though, you typically put this on Dwayne because he needs it to survive. But realistically, like the agility buff here, the extra 3 agility in the card, the 5 spirit here, the light resistance, the HP, the slash attack, like all these stats here are perfection for Joker. It's really just trying to fit in which character you want to put it on, but theoretically this would be a stellar card to put on him for the agility buff on both the unit effect and the actual stat itself. And then finally, one that I think is underrated, we're going to talk about later, is the Fleeting Blossom Banquet. Now, I wouldn't necessarily put this on Joker. I'd probably put this on a sub VC of someone where I needed it, but this is where the acquired AP of 50% for the party comes in with the extra crit damage as well. So we're going to talk about why that might have some use later on. We get into the notable Espers. Honestly, kind of a tough one because it's not that there's a tough decision here. At this point in the game, though, Espers are in such wide variety and so matchup dependent, it's hard to say that there's a de facto best one. I think to me, the first one that I resonated with him was Odin. That's like the default best DPS Esper, where again 20 agility is going to make him extremely fast. Great attack stats here. It's got the slash attack, the man killer, the accuracy if you want to make sure that he's got that little bit of extra oomph, and then niche missile resistance or slash resistance depending on the matchups, however you want to build that board, but it's super versatile. And then Dark Odin for like almost exactly the same reason, where you're talking 18 agility here. The board itself, although it's known for its evasion for evade units, you could obviously make that slash oriented with both of these parts of the tree instead, as well as human killer. And then again, kind of niche, you have the magic resistance or the missile resistance to pick from as you choose. Both great options. And then I do think Omega is probably like one of my third choices here, where sure, in a light matchup, not great to go for a dark element Esper, but the dark attack, the slash attack, light killer, it's got attack up nodes, got some light resistance on it, and then the crit rate and magic resistance, really just a ton of versatility to build for. So I'll stop there because everything else is very matchup dependent, but those are to me like three very well-rounded Espers overall. We're talking about notable weapons. The de facto, like maybe one of the best ones to me is the Rebel Knife, because it does offer both slash attack and missile attack, so it'll help both those attack types. In terms of optimal builds, I actually do like the Assault or the Critical. I would probably lean toward the Assault here though, where there's not a lot about his kit that relies on critical hits, and although the accuracy is nice, I think you can get it externally. He doesn't need a ton of help with it, but at the end of the day, if you're really worried about him not hitting things, this is great too. But 197 to 137 is a fairly decent attack difference between the two, so I think Assault is a safe enough choice. I think Mage Masher obviously is the other de facto like go-to for knives. This one I think is probably inferior. Sure, the attack stat is technically higher on this, but losing out on the modifier of missile attack is definitely a demerit against this sword, where there's nothing else really unique about these builds that his own dagger doesn't already have. I think another one here is Locke's Dagger, where kind of the same idea. You can decide between Assault and Aim, but I think Assault is probably a safe choice. This one's really more just for tank busting, in particular for the extra defense penetration, where he does have 40 on the passive, which is going to get up to 70 when he does Limit Break, and this will put him at 90, which is a little bit overkill, but when you do consider that he does not have any slash resistance penetration or any missile resistance penetration, if you are trying to get through a very, physically bulky tank that has good slash missile resistances in its own, being able to cleave through, almost 100% of the defense stat probably is pretty impactful, considering that that's who's going to be attacking. Unless you're going against tankless evasion, which really a lot of things can be, it's not unique to Joker, he's going to have to go through a tank at some point. So when you consider a lot of the meta tanks like Joom or Engelbert, they really do rely on their defense stats, so being able to cleave through that is pretty important. Now for the Truststone recommendations, on the left side of things, I actually am partial to the defense or the spirit. To me, his HP as a base is not high enough to really get a ton of benefit from the HP boost there, and the all element resistance is nice, but I think not having any innate defense or spirit, it's nice to at least be able to put one or the other on here, where if you have the UR stones, you're talking an extra 15 defense or an extra 15 spirit, which to me is pretty impactful. And then in terms of which passives you want to put on here, there's honestly a bunch, and you could go through a whole list of ones that are good on every character no matter what, but specific for Joker, if I were to say I really want this passive on him in particular, I do think the agility debuff resistance of 50% is really powerful, particularly against a lot of what we're seeing with Joom and Elena that have agility down, that because it's going to scale off of his base agility, which is very high, it actually will reduce it by a fair amount when he gets it reduced. So what this will do is have a 50% chance that the agility debuff does not apply at all. That's how that mechanic works. It's a percentage chance that it either works or it doesn't work. It's not a reduction. So I do like that very much for him. Now for the right side of the board, a little more unique compared to what I normally think of. And AP as a type, I've never liked this overall, but he strikes me as the kind of character that you probably don't want to have to rely on bells for. Because again, if we're talking a character, death by 1,000 cuts, you want to be able to spam your abilities a little bit here. And he doesn't have the cheapest abilities in the world. So this one will obviously increase his starting AP by 10%, which will increase how much he starts the battle with. And then will also decrease the AP consumption by 10, which will stack with his mastery, which is 15. So you're talking a total of 25% decreased AP consumption. We're going to go through a whole fight hypothetical of this in just a moment. I do think the agility one is another good one, where if you really want to like lean into that, the extra upwards of, 6 to 7 agility that you get from the UR stones in conjunction with a set bonus, I think goes a long way to really leaning into that advantage of having the turn order. And then in terms of passives here, this is one of the ones where I really would hunt very hard for both slash resistance penetration, missile resistance penetration, and the acquired AP of 20%, where again, he has neither of these two in his kit innately, and he cannot equip the diamond cloak either, which is the missile resistance penetration, a former raid item. You can't equip that. So being able to put this passive on here instead actually is pretty important in my opinion. You're going to want to hunt for these. And so we talk about the AP, build here on the right side here, where acquired AP of 20% and the AP set bonus. Let's go through a scenario. So I took, Joker, Dwayne, and Black Rose Lena. Now, unfortunately, the WOTV calc is kind of busted at the moment, where it's not properly calculating the Persona 5 stats. So I had to do some of this by hand. I think it's mostly correct. It's directionally correct. So I think the theory still holds true. But essentially, I gave Joker this build that we're seeing at the moment, nothing too crazy, out of the ordinary. For vision cards on Dwayne and Black Rose Lana, nothing too crazy either. The one I want to point out here is I do have Fleeting Blossom Banquet as the sub card on Helena. So he should have a total starting AP of about 212 max AP, so he'll start the battle with 36. And again, that max AP is being benefited by the 10% AP up on the Trust Stone, as well as the Odin giving him AP, and then the Element Mastery of 30 that I assumed is giving him extra AP as well. When you consider the 60% acquired AP, so 20% of that is from the passive on the Trust Stone, and 40% of it is from the Fleeting Blossom Banquet, and then he has 25% reduced AP consumption by his 15% Mastery ability, and his 10% on the Trust Stone. So that's kind of where we're starting. Now we talk about what does that do for you. His starting AP is 36, and so if we assume turn 1, he does that ability where he moves to a teammate, grants them Protect, and is the barrier for himself, and then let's say he uses full power after, which is the 40% buff, as well as the decreased hate. I actually have bells on him here, but I don't want him using bells. Again, my fear is that he uses it, moves forward too far with the jump 2 movement, and then ends up attacking an enemy, and this whole theory goes to shit. So assuming those two, he'll start 81 AP before he attacks an enemy. Now, if we talk about the scenarios, what can you do with 81 AP? Well, this is the list of total attacks on the main job and his limit break here at the bottom. And if you recall, we have the decreased AP consumption. So the AP values you're seeing here on the right, well, they're really these white values instead. It's a pretty significant reduction, and I'm really thinking in mind the limit break that going from 49 AP to 36 AP is a very, very big reduction, where I would like for him to be able to use this limit break and then still be able to span some abilities after. And if that's the case, well, if you start at 81, use your limit break, you're going to have 45 AP remaining, and then it's, whatever the AI ends up dictating. But then let's say use one-shot kill, which the decreased defense, you're now down to 24 AP, and then he uses Aegion after that, you're down to 5 AP. The fact of the matter is you're using 3 abilities before you have to start doing normal attacks or rebuffing your teammates, which this is going to be just drastically reduced when you don't have the same starting AP or the AP consumption reduction to these levels. And it's at that point, you're left with 5 AP. You're going to do normal attack, regenerate some. You're going to use ambush next, which is only 10 AP. It's going to give you 250 CT back, and very quickly you're going to spam some extra abilities to hopefully lap your enemy at the end of the fight. But that's my Joker review in a nutshell. I really like this character. I think he's hindered more than anything by the dark cast at the moment, where what we've seen for a lot of meta changes recently is driven by the tanks that have come out, in addition to the characters themselves. But recently, a lot of these tanks, you look at Charlotte, Celeste, Joom, they all have some element of like Protect and Shell, unit resistance up, something to that effect that really adds to their survivability. And Dwayne is like almost completely power crept at this point, where I really don't even consider him a tank in the current state of the game. I really don't, because although he starts with 5 hate, he's got no way to regenerate that hate once the battle starts. So he takes 3 hits, and then he's a DPS at that point. He's no longer a tank. And then quite frankly, his survivability is not nearly at the level that it needs to be to actually compete with the other variety of elements. So from that perspective, that's kind of where I see Joker being held back the most. It's not that he's a bad character. I think he's a great character. Obviously, I gave him the rating as such, but I don't think he's going to, make a giant splash now that he's here. He's certainly going to be feasible, and obviously all of this depends on what content you're using, what your rank is, what you have for equipment. So this is very subjective to, wherever you are personally in the game. But speaking at the top level, he's a great character, but his use probably comes in down the line once we get a few more of the other Dark units thrown into the fray, where right now Dark is kind of going through the start of a renaissance, and Joker's the first unit there. So definite pull if you want to participate in the future for sure. So that's my review in a nutshell. Thanks for watching. Thanks for looking at this silly outfit for like 30 minutes or however long this video is. And I'm looking forward to doing the other reviews for the Persona unit. So thanks everybody, and I'll talk to y'all soon.